Hey folks, I'm Matt from Cut Content, and thank you for tuning in to DM Radio. Before we hop into today's episode, there is a bit of housekeeping we need to do, so my apologies for that. First thing, pretty straightforward. I know we've missed a couple weeks of videos. Sorry about that. There was just technical problems. Nothing's going on. The microphone just was not working, and if you can't record audio, videos of any kind tend to be less good. So in the interest of bringing you quality and or something that could conceivably be watched by a human being, we've just had to delay. But, because of that, I was going to do a series of videos that would take us up through the end of September. And my intention is to still do that. So you're going to get some extra videos. I'm talking today, Friday. I'm talking tomorrow, Saturday. I'm talking next Wednesday. I'm talking next Saturday. Then it's October, you get one extra video, you're welcome. Boom. Yeah, so that's a pretty sick deal. The other thing is that October is going to be... I didn't really have a catchy name for it, so I've decided to call it the month of spooks. Ooh, so... well, originally it was going to be one month of only horror games. What I might do now is I might say half the videos, like one of the two videos a week, will be a horror game, and maybe I'll throw in an extra one on Halloween or something. I don't know. I haven't decided yet. But because my schedule got kind of messed up with all these technical difficulties, there's some videos that I'm really excited to get to that I just don't think would work if I pushed them too longer. So it's still going to be a month of spooks. There will be lots of horror games to go around. There will be some videos that probably will not be. And there's one in particular that I'm hopeful that I'll get to make. And I think you guys will either really dig or you'll stop watching this channel entirely. So here's hoping we get to that, and I don't chicken out like a gigantic jerk. But I think that's all the real housekeeping stuff. So let's get on to the topic of the video, which is we're going to talk about getting started in your first DM game. That's not a sentence. We're going to start by talking about you getting started DMing your first game. Boom, nailed it. Second try. That's the best one. So I'm not going to get into a lot of specifics here. It's more going to be, these are just the general steps that you want to take if you're getting ready to run your own RPG for the first time. And the logical place to begin this series is just with getting started. So what does that mean exactly? Well, first, be a player. Before you can be a dungeon master, it is highly recommended that you be a player. Now, this is not always true. Sometimes that's not even an option. Maybe you're the only one in your group willing to take on the DMing responsibility. I know when I first started playing, it was in 5th grade. We were using the first edition AD&D rules, which are broken, but we didn't care. It was a great time. And a buddy of mine, who is a fantastic DM, one of the best I know, he had to DM before he ever played. And there were some bumps in the road, mostly because none of us knew how to play the game, but it all worked out. It's not impossible. But your life is going to be a lot easier if you play first. There are a bunch of reasons for this. One of the biggest ones is just you'll know the rules better. And that's just common sense. But also, it sort of bleeds into the second most important thing, which is finding what excites you. Because as a DM, your goal entirely is to run a game in which you would want to play. Because if you're not doing that, you will not run a game that you like. It's just that simple. I mean, if you're not passionate about it, if you're not excited about it, if you're not at least intrigued by it, then you're not going to be providing sort of an interesting experience or immersive experience for your players. And nobody wants that. Now, the best way to do that is, of course, by playing the game, not only figuring out, oh, I prefer combat encounters where maybe we rely heavily on the environment, or I really wish there was more like role-playing story stuff interspersed with some of the action. I need more of a linear thing. Those are more mechanical, but it would also be good if you can figure out while you're playing just how much do you enjoy the story? How much do you like classic dungeon crawls? Do you really like interacting with unique characters? Do you need, as is often the case, a mix of all of those? It's pretty straightforward stuff, but it's also important. Sometimes you can figure this out without playing, by just what do you really like reading about in fantasy novels, or if you're watching a fantasy film, what stands out to you. And that can work, but a lot of first-time D&D players make one big mistake, which is that D&D is not a movie or book. It is a collaborative storytelling medium. And that means the stuff that maybe works to watch or read doesn't always translate. Or if it does, it needs some alterations first. So just play, find out what you like, find out what makes a game you want to play. And maybe you want to play in a character-heavy game that's not necessarily earth-shaking in consequences, but you get really attached to certain NPCs, and it's about internal character growth as you conquer various physical challenges. That's totally fine. Or maybe you're like, no, I really do want an epic sort of Lord of the Rings style good versus evil conflict. That's great. There's nothing wrong with that. People sometimes get a little bit particular about like, oh, that's kind of been done. Look, we're playing Dungeons and Dragons, okay? It's all been done in some way or another, and it's also never been done because you've never done it. And even if you have run this campaign before, if it's a new set of players, it's all gonna be different. You can't both somehow hold yourself to an impossible standard when it comes to quote-unquote plagiarizing, which isn't really what it is anyway, and then also expect that people are just going to really buy into whatever weird thing you create for the sake of being weird. There's nothing wrong with a bit of weirdness. It usually makes games a little more interesting. But don't be so hard on yourself if you realize you're like, oh my god, I can't have elves and dwarves and hobbits and stuff because they're too standard. I better throw in flurnkles, and the flurnkles are like dwarf elves. It's just nobody needs that. People are happy where they are. Embrace what makes the genre great and go for it. At the end of the day, as long as you're excited about it, you can do no wrong. As long as you can also make sure that the players are having a good time. Which brings us to the next point. If you are DMing a game, it is a common pitfall to think that your responsibility is to the players only. And while yes, you do have a responsibility to them, you also have to enjoy the game. Aside from the fact that will just make the game better and your players won't like it if you don't like it, this is supposed to be fun. Let it be fun. And if you're doing something that you think is resonating with the players, but it really isn't working for you, either find a way to tailor it to yourself that won't, disappoint them, or find something else that they like and you like. It's just not going to be... I've ran campaigns where the players seemed to enjoy it, and I really wasn't feeling it, and I realized I had to end the campaign. I just did, because I wasn't enjoying it, I wasn't having a good time, and I knew I wasn't going to give them what they deserved as the campaign went on. So that campaign was one session, I think, maybe two, and I pretty much immediately realized, no, I made a mistake. And that's fine. As a DM, you're going to make mistakes on the macro scale. You just got to embrace that. But speaking of scale, that's one of the last things I want to talk about today, which is you need to decide also, right off the bat, how big is your game? And I don't just mean how many people are playing in it. I mean, how long do you want it to take? Like, not in real life, in the game. Do you want characters to age and grow up and have families? Do you want it to be relatively confined to within a year or two? Do you want it to span empires across the continent? Do you want a game focused around a single village? I've run a game like that, and it's a lot of fun. People got really into the NPCs. It's important not to stretch the game on for too long if you do that, because without a lot of exploration, it can get kind of dull. But for a couple months, that was great. On the other hand, I've also ran games where you're traveling all over the known world, and that can be really exciting. And often games will sort of have a mix. Maybe there'll be a place where you start out, and as you level up, you move on, go places. all that's pretty standard. But if you want to have some sort of cosmic scale, for lack of a better term, it's a good thing to think about before you get started playing the game. And the last thing for today, because I'm trying to keep this series of videos kind of short, for your viewing pleasure, is what type of game do you want to run? And I'm not saying do you want to be combat heavy or role-playing heavy or a nice mix, which is what almost all of them end up coming out to anyway. Do you want it to be epic fantasy? Do you want it to be, again, Lord of the Rings style, good versus evil, noble people who are beleaguered on all sides, the last refuges of light and good in the world, fighting off an encroaching evil? Do you want to be heroic fantasy, some of the more standard D&D, where you're a group of people who, you wander around, solve problems, go on adventures, dig through dungeons. The world is a wild place, and you're some of the people who make your living and find your joy just sort of embracing that. Do you want to be a political campaign, like some of the darker aspects of Game of Thrones, with more backstabbing and who do we trust and a lot of NPC interaction? Do you want it to be a mythological campaign where every character is the son of a god of some kind, and they all maybe start, even if they only start at first level, they could maybe start with powers that seem unnatural or impossibly strong to what we would consider to be a mortal person. Or maybe it's a game that's based heavily on a different kind of mythology, local folklore, or a gothic horror game, which, the best campaign I've ever ran was a gothic horror campaign that lasted almost a year, playing every week, and it was incredible. I had to tailor a lot of stuff, and maybe I'll do a separate DM radio on specific genres and how to make them work at a later point, but my point for now is it doesn't have to be standard D&D, and it doesn't have to defy all genre conventions. It's just about what feels right to you and how to make it feel internally consistent. Because, we're sitting around a table, rolling dice, pretending to use swords and shit. It takes some suspension of disbelief, and that's totally fine. It's fantastic. But you don't want to make it harder to suspend the disbelief than it has to be, and if you're bouncing all over from genre to genre in a way that, instead of being zany fun, just feels like, wait, I thought this campaign was something else entirely, your players are going to have a harder time suspending that disbelief, and you never want that. Anyway, so those are some of the general things that you just want to start thinking about. Obviously, there are a lot more, but when you first get started and you're like, I want to run a campaign, this is going to be how you figure out what sort of campaign you want to run. Next time, we'll be getting more into inspiration and how to get into kind of the nitty-gritty of what all this ends up looking like. And after that, we got a couple more parts that I think you'll really enjoy. For now, thank you for tuning in, and I will see you next time.